First of all, I want to welcome everybody to our Sunday morning breakfast, New Year's Day, January 2019. And thank you everybody for joining us. And I guess in Shemayim they should understand, though it's not the Jewish New Year, it's the first day of the second New Year, the first thing we're choosing to do is to come to hear a Shir on Torah. So maybe that should stand well for us. Shemayim, the first thing we're doing in 2019, hearing a Shir. So the name of the Shir really is, it's a name based on a Gemara we're going to look at in Brachot, which is going to deal with the story of Rabbi Akiva, which deals with a rooster, a candle, and a donkey. And we're going to get to that in a minute. But the point of the Shir, what we want to develop a little bit, is a perspective on how to deal with life's challenges. And try to grasp it a little bit from what the Torah wants us to see and what we could do practically in order to deal with the different areas of our lives that are challenging, and by doing so find the joy and the simcha that Hashem really wants us to have in this world. And that's really the bottom line, that Hashem wants us to have tremendous joy in everything that we do. And sometimes maybe we miss it because we don't always know how to deal effectively with that which Hashem sends our way. Just a place to start, if we take a look in the Chumash, in Parshas Vayigash, in chapter 47, verse 8. So, the first time Yaakov comes down to Mitzrayim, and he meets Paro, there's a very interesting conversation that takes place. And the conversation goes as follows, in these Chumashim, page 264, 265. Vayomer Paro Yaakov, and Paro says to Yaakov, Kam yemei shnei chayecha. Says, how many days are the years of your life? That's an interesting first question for Paro to ask Yaakov. Basically, how many days are the years of your life? Which is really saying, how old are you? There must have been something about Yaakov which was sort of astonishingly old looking. And the reality was, he was old looking. He was 130 years old. So we know that he was in Mitzrayim for 17 years. He dies at 147. So he's 130. And I guess as a 130-year-old, he looked like an old 130-year-old. You know, there are young 130-year-olds and there are old 130-year-olds. I guess the young ones are playing golf in Miami Beach, and the old ones, look like Yaakov. So he was an old-looking 130-year-old. For Yomi Yaakov o Paro, and Yaakov says to Paro, Yemei shnei mugurai shloshim shana ma'atu ra'im. Says that the days of the years of my sojourns, shloshim ma'at shana ma'at v'ra'im. I'm 130 years old, but the reason I look so old is because my days have been ra'im. My days have been bad. And objectively, I think Yaakov, of all the Avos, he had a very difficult life. When we think about his life, in the sense that he had to flee from Esav, and he was missing. He had to run away, on his way to Esav. The Eliphaz tries to kill him. That's Esav's son. He then goes to Lavan, and he has to work for Lavan for many years. And there's a switch that takes place. He has to marry Rachel, marries Leah. He comes back to Eretz Yisrael. Eventually, after 22 years, and he encounters Esav again. He makes it through, and then Dinah is taken, terrible rape situation, and then Yosef is missing. So it's a life of really angry. He had a very difficult life of all the Avos. And he says to Paro, the reason why I look so old is because I've had a bad life. The rhyme. I still haven't yet achieved the length of the days of the life of my fathers. I'm not as old as my fathers were. I guess I could talk about longevity in the family. But he's really commenting and saying, the reason why I look so old is because of the difficulty of my life. And then it says, V'yivarek Yaakov es Paro v'yetzim ifnei Paro. And Yaakov blessed Paro, and yetzim ifnei Paro, and he left Paro. It's interesting that our sages comment on this conversation, and Hashem is very critical of it. And Hashem's comment about Yaakov's response to Paro is, Yaakov, I brought Dinah back to you. I saved you from your brother Esau. I returned Yosef to you. And not only did I return him to you, you discovered that in this process whereby you thought he was missing, he had been elevated to be the most important man in the world. Yaakov, everything turned out in a way which wasn't just good, but was beyond your imagination of how good it could be. And you have the audacity, you have the chutzpah to say that your life was bad. Hashem's very critical in that statement. Now it's interesting, had Yaakov known what was happening to Yosef, for example, during those years, of course Yaakov would have perhaps dealt with it differently, but he didn't know. For those years that Yosef was missing, he thought Yosef was dead. He did not know that it would turn out like this. And therefore he was suffering the loss and feeling the pain. And therefore when he comments to Paro and says, my life has been bad, Hashem's response to that is, how could you say bad? Don't you see, look what was going on over here. Look what happened. It's almost a little bit of an unfair criticism of Yaakov because he didn't know what was going on. And that's why he aged. But listen, Hashem says even further in this. Hashem says, for every word in that conversation, I'm going to remove 1 year of your life. In other words, Yaakov passed away when he was 147. Apparently he was supposed to have lived to be the same age of his father, Yitzchak, which was 180. So he lost 33 years of his life, potential life, because he uttered the word Ra. My life was bad. So Chaim Shmuel Levitz makes an interesting comment on this, and he says that, the Mir Rosh Yeshiva, and he says, that's really not fair, because Hashem also removes, in this conversation, the first part of the conversation is, Vayomer Paro el Yaakov, Kami Yemei Shnei Chayecho. And Paro says to Yaakov, how old are you? There's 7 words there. Those 7 words are included in the 33 years that Yaakov loses for having said the word, my life is bad. That seems to be unfair. It's one thing if Yaakov says, my life is bad, and Hashem wants to take him to task for it. But why is Hashem taking him to task for those 7 words that Yaakov says? That Paro says to him. Paro says to him, Vayomer Paro Yaakov, and Paro says to Yaakov, Kami Yemei Shnei Chayecho. How many days are the years of your life? So why is Yaakov taking to task for Paro's question to him? He shouldn't lose those 7 years. It should be 33 minus 7. Mm-hmm. So Chaim Shmuel Levitz says he loses those 7 years also because he inspired the question.
I think the lesson is you shouldn't speak to Goyim about your life.
Oh, interesting. Right, interesting. Paro, that's interesting. I guess Paro was a very wise person. We shouldn't undermine Paro. Paro knew 70 languages. He was someone of significance in terms of
except for Hebrew,
except Lashon HaKodesh, right? At least in our Lashon HaKodesh. But he recognized in Yaakov some greatness in Yaakov. He saw it right away, and he was stunned by the way he looked. He saw something. You look very old.
Why Yaakov said what he said? Why did he say that?
Yeah.
Why?
Right. That's the question.
Why he complained?
He's taking the task for it. He's taking the task. And not only is he taking the task for it, he's taking the task for this to have elicited the question. It's one thing to complain, but I can't anticipate the question you're going to ask me. So it looks like he could have anticipated that question.
Baruch Hashem, and that's it. End of the story.
Could have said that, right.
It's hard to say that when there's a famine. To go there and say everything's great.
True.
People are dying,
but the comment was really, Paro looked at him and said, why do you look so old? Like, how old are you? As if to say, you look super. Your age something looks like about you, dude. Like you just look supremely very old. And then Yaakov responds and says, well, I've had a difficult life. My life has been bad. And Hashem said, listen, okay, that whole conversation was 33 words. You're going to lose 33 years of your life. And not only those, and in those 33 years, 7 of those years because you elicited the question from Paro. Now, I think what the Chaim Shmuel Levitz says on that line, he says that had Yaakov been looking at his life differently while he was undergoing all these different tragic events, maybe he wouldn't have aged so much. And as a result, he wouldn't even have inspired the question.
That's
so the fact that he inspired the question because perhaps he had not been dealing with his life's tragedies in the proper way. And that seems to be what the Rosh Yeshiva of the Mir says, Chaim Shmuel Levitz. In other words, he brought about the question because he didn't look at him. He wasn't seeing everything he could see while he was undergoing what he was undergoing, which implies that maybe he could have avoided the aging process had he been dealing with life's scenarios differently? Now that's interesting. Question, I think that Dr. Amado was raising there, but then what did he do wrong? He said, look, my life has been bad. Like, that's why I aged. Is that really so terrible to say? He had an extraordinarily difficult life, as we mentioned. I heard from Rosh Yeshiva Hannah Leibovitz, and I think this is what others seem to comment about this, is that never utter the word bad. Don't say ra. Don't say my life is bad. Say my life is challenging. Say my life has been filled with difficulties. Say my life has been painful. Say that I've dealt with I've suffered. I've felt suffering. But to give it this attribute of bad, means you miss the point. Hashem doesn't bring bad into our life. Don't say the word ra. He's taking the task for letting that word ra slip out. That's what apparently Hashem says, Yaakov, you on your level should never have said the word, my life is bad. And he's really taken to task very severely for that. 33 years of potential life. What could have been? Loses. Because he said the word ra. It certainly puts things into perspective, I feel, and to some level, as to how careful we have to be with that word ra. Is it really bad? Is it really bad? Or are we supposed to be looking at life and looking at life's vicissitudes and the events that occur in our life in a way where we can frame it differently, and we can find a way to see, is there some good underneath the surface? I noticed that there's a beautiful sefer called the Toras Avram. Toras Avram was one of the Rosh Yeshivas in Slobodka. Slobodka was the great Mussar Yeshiva in Lithuania. And Toras Avram has a wonderful work, Avram Garzinski, and he also suffered, by the way. Avram Garzinski, he was murdered by the Nazis in the Kovno ghetto, together with Elchanan Wasserman. Apparently, before he died, Toras Avram was teaching the laws of, Elchanan Wasserman was teaching how to die al Kiddush Hashem. He was actually teaching, is there a bracha that you make? Elchanan Wasserman felt that you do make a bracha. We're dying al Kiddush Hashem now, we're dying sanctifying God's name, so he was teaching the bracha. And Toras Avram, during the whole time during the Kovno ghetto, was writing an amazing work about how we have to work on ourselves spiritually. We have to be making sure that we're keeping Shabbos properly, we're keeping kosher properly, keeping Taras Mishpacha in the ghetto. While they were in tremendous straits, he rose to such an unbelievable level, even towards the end of his life. And apparently, as he was being taken away by the Nazis before he was murdered, it was called the Ninth Fort in the Kovno ghetto, where they shot them. He was, you could see a tranquility on his face. Tranquility. They were learning, to the last moment, they were learning together with Wasserman before they were taken. And his daughter describes it as he was taken, just to tranquility. It's a princeliness about him. He was taken off. So I'm very moved by the Toras Avram. One of my particular pieces of work that I try to learn. But he comments on he comments about an interesting statement about Yaakov's life. And he says in terms of Yaakov apparently had made another complaint early on in his life. And that was a complaint when Yehuda came back, and Yehuda turned to Yehuda came back to Yaakov and said, they've taken Shimon. That ruler down in Egypt, he didn't know it was Yosef, has put Shimon in prison, and they demand Binyamin. He wants to see Binyamin. He wants to see that we're not really spies. He says, bring Binyamin down. So Yaakov's response to Yehuda is, Lama Hayrosam li. Why did you bring this bad upon me? That was his comment to Yehuda. Why do you have to tell him about a little brother Binyamin? And the Midrashim record that Yehuda says back, or actually the Psukim say it, Yehuda said, listen, I didn't think he was asking about the family. Like, he just started talking about the family. Do you have a father? Do you have any other brothers? I said, we have a brother, I started explaining, we have another one, one's missing, we haven't seen him. I have another brother Binyamin who our father loves so much. And then he said to me, bring him down. I didn't expect it. I wasn't there to make a shidduch. I wasn't there to talk about families. I was trying just to explain who we are. And Yaakov says the words, why do you bring this evil upon me? Lama hayrosam li. Hashem also comments there. And the Midrash records it, and the Toras Avram Garzinski records it over here in a beautiful piece. And he says as follows. He says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer. HaKadosh Baruch Hu apparently saying this as if there's a conversation between Hashem and Yaakov. Hashem says, or maybe speaking to the Malachim, He says, "Roeh hintcha rak esahov." He says, you only see the present, as if he's talking to Yaakov. Lo asa otid shel eze shonim. But you don't see the future. You don't see the whole perspective, he's saying. When you see Yaakov, you're just seeing what's in front of you. Ani osek lo hamplich es benoba Misraim. I'm involved. Ani osek, Hashem is saying. I've been involved in crowning your son to be king in Egypt. Meichen ani as kisei hameluchos shel Misraim avuro. I've been going through the process of preparing his throne, that he should sit and be the king of Egypt for you, because you're going to need him there, because there's going to be a famine in the world, and he's going to need to rescue you. I've been preparing a situation where your son is being elevated to be the most important man in the world. Chvod gedol she'ein kamosam. I've been arranging it, Hashem says, where he's going to have honor and gedula she'ein kamosam, like you've never seen before in history, which is true. No one was ever elevated like Yosef. V'omer lama rosamli. And Hashem says, he says to me, why do you bring this bad upon me? Sounds like Hashem is speaking to the Malachim. Lo rak es osid enu roa. So then, he says, I think this is Avram Gorzinski now commenting on the Medrash, he says, Lo rak es osid enu roa. Not only does Yaakov not see the future, elegam es ahova. He also doesn't see the present. What does that mean? Ach barichok makom. Says Yaakov, bocha b'chishel avelos olam. Yaakov, for the last 22 years, has been in a state of mourning for his son Yosef. He never got over it. He was never able to be fully comforted. And the reason why is because he said naturally, when a person dies, a degree of shichuchok sets in, forgetfulness. We forget, which is a helpful thing. Hashem creates it that way, so we shouldn't feel such pain, such sorrow. But the fact, because Yosef didn't really die, Yaakov never was able to gain that sort of spiritual comfort of forgetting. So in his mind, it was always active as if he lost Yosef that day. So for 22 years, he's experiencing the pain over and over again. It's very interesting. Constantly, Kosh Baruch creates the ability to forget the deceased from our heart and allow us to go on. But if someone's not really dead, we don't achieve that. That's why it's very painful for wives of soldiers who were missing in action, MIA. I remember in the days of Vietnam and certainly the days of Lebanon and things like this, when Jewish soldiers were missing in action. It's a very difficult scenario for the family because a wife senses, she's not really gone, or knows it. Something they also know when something changed spiritually. They're able to feel it, but it's a very painful thing not to know. So it says, Yaakov Avinu bocha b'chishel avelos olam. Yaakov was crying for all these years. And while he was crying, Yosef had already been king for 9 years. So he's crying about the death and loss of his son. And Yosef was already 9 years of those crying. Yosef was king. And he comes and said, to think about it, how far away was Yosef really, physically? How long would it have taken, let's say Yaakov was in Beersheba? How long would it take for Yaakov to go to Cairo? How many miles or kilometers is it? It's a very short distance. Maybe it's, I don't even know from there. Maybe is it 30 miles? It might be less. I know the Egyptian Air Force, the Israeli Air Force, when they destroyed the Egyptian Air Force in 1967, I think they got there in 2 minutes. It wiped out 250 Soviet MiGs on the ground. Then a couple of minutes.
Yosef didn't tell him if he's alive.
Was that?
Why Yosef didn't answer if he's
So
alive?
that's a famous question. It was really phrased always, why didn't Yosef write home? That's a famous question. Why didn't Yosef inform his father, I'm alive? He had 9 years to do it.
Is it because brothers took the...
He didn't do it. So it's a famous question. It's a very, very question. The few answers to that question are, number one, it could be maybe that maybe the Egyptians didn't let him. Maybe they monitored his contact. They didn't want to lose him. It could be number two. It's maybe I don't know.
the Rambam writes that it's because he wanted to fulfill the prophecy.
Right.
So he had to do it in such a way where he has to wait for them to come so he could reveal to them so they can know who he is.
Yes, right, 100%. That Maxwell is expressing right. Another idea could be that right. He was waiting till the prophecy was fulfilled of everyone bowing down to him. He needed to see that happen, so he's kind of waiting for it to happen. He didn't want to.
And also he didn't want to cause tension between the brothers and the father.
Right, could be a third reason, which is a little speculative, but I think it's very fascinating. And there's a certain person very involved in Tanakh and Eretz Yisrael, the old Ben Nun, who says this idea that maybe Yosef didn't know where his father stood in all this. Maybe he didn't know what Yaakov was really thinking. The last he saw Yaakov was that Yaakov, Yaakov sends him, go check on the shalom of your brothers in Shechem. And Yosef's response to that is Hineni. I'm ready for this mission, just like at the Akiva, Avram says Hineni. Hineni, I'm ready to go. I understand this is a mission. And next thing he knows, his brothers attack him, he ends up in a pit, and he's sold down to Egypt. Maybe he didn't know exactly where his father stood in all this.
Wow.
Was his
That
father
is
with?
pretty
Yeah, it's
speculative.
very speculative, but it's certainly interesting. Maybe he really didn't know, because it's very interesting the conversation later that he has with Yehuda, when Yehuda approaches him, and Yehuda tries to plead for the life of Binyamin, and Yehuda makes a comment to Yosef and says to Yosef, "Look, we can't do this. He had another son, he had another brother, he had another son who had been eaten by a wild animal, and it looks like Yosef's response was like, really? Like, that's what you told him? He had no idea what was told to Yaakov. He did not know. And there's another medrash that does talk about the Rabbi was expressing these ideas that certainly in Mitzrayim he didn't want to create tension. It says during the 17 years that Yaakov was in Mitzrayim, Yosef never allowed himself to be alone with Yaakov. Why? Because he was afraid that Yaakov would turn to him and say, by the way, how'd you get down here? Like what? Tell me the story. And he didn't want the brothers to ever suspect that he had told Yaakov, so the brothers should have a relationship with their father. He sacrificed his relationship with his father, so the brothers should be comfortable with their father. So yes, his level of tzidkus, his righteousness, is extraordinary, is to me. It's something which is outstanding, But it could be he really doesn't know. He doesn't know what happened. Another medrash says something also very interesting. He turns to Binyamin, and he says to Binyamin, and this is what the Srom Maror brings down. The Srom Maror was one of the Gerushi Sfard who was expelled from Spain in 1492. Fantastic insights, and based on a medrash, he says that he turned to Binyamin, and he said to Binyamin, because Binyamin never knew. Binyamin never knew what happened to him. And even when he revealed himself to his brothers, and he said, Ani Yosef, Hashem Achartamli, who you sold to Mitzrayim, Hashem Achartam, Isam Yosef, Hashem Achartamli, you sold me. He asks Binyamin to leave. Before he says that, he tells Binyamin to leave. He turns to the brothers. I'm Yosef, who you sold. So he comes to Binyamin later and he says to Binyamin, what did you think? What do you think happened to me? So Binyamin said, well, they came back, the brothers came back, and there was a bloody coat, and we assumed that you were eaten by a wild animal. And Yosef goes, that's right, that's what happened. He said, I was kidnapped, and then they brought me into a cave, and they took my coat, and there was a wild lion there, and the wild lion, ate the person who captured me, and therefore the blood of that person got on the coat, and I was able to, get out of the cave in time, and so once he hears that's the story, he tells Binyamin, that's exactly what happened. So, he never wanted to reveal to Binyamin. But it's a good question, Dr. Ahmed. It's speculative why he never revealed himself, and certainly you could say different answers, and one could be he did not know what Yaakov felt. Which might be an interesting thought to think about, and it is hard to know. But what the Torah of Rabbi is saying over here is something very interesting, that Yaakov is crying for 22 years. 9 of those years, Yosef is king. Hashem has been preparing everything to happen that Yosef should be elevated. And ani mamlechas hamelech, I'm crowning him, I'm coronating him. And you're saying the word bad? And then Torah Safram comments and says, wait a minute, if not only does Yaakov not know the future, look at the present. What you think is bad, if you could just see 30 miles across the horizon, what would you see? You'd see Yosef being elevated to the most powerful position in the world. It's only 30 miles away. That's all it is, which is phenomenal. That's all. The crow flies. It's just right over there. Caravans could probably get there in maybe a day and a half. Israeli jets, give them 2 minutes. That's all it was. 30 miles away. I'm estimating, but that maybe something like that. You can't even see the present. So this perspective where we utilize the word ra and think things are evil and bad, it's not only that we can't see the future, we just don't even see the present. We have blinders onto the present. So therefore, how important it is to assess every situation that we're in and realize that we really don't know what is happening. We can just see the perspective of what's before our eyes, and even what's before our eyes is limited. The present can be limited. If Yaakov could just have binoculars and look 30 miles away, you would see it. You would see what's going on. He couldn't see that either. So again, these midrashim all indicate, I think, are all pointing to us a certain attitude that we have to have. That we have to approach scenarios in life in a way where we understand that our lack of information doesn't necessarily dictate that what's happening is bad. We just have to understand something is happening. Question is, how do we frame it? How do we look at it? So I always feel, in terms of framing it, it's very important to know the Hebrew language a little bit. So in Hebrew, we have two words for why. One word for why is lama, and one word for why is madua. So lama in Hebrew, the letter lamed is a preposition. It means to. Ma means what? To or for. Lama means for what? For what future purpose is this happening? It's pointing the arrow this way. I want to look to the future. I don't understand what's happening right now, but lama. There's a future good that I can't necessarily perceive right now. Madua is the second word we have for why. Madua. Madua is from the Hebrew preposition mi, or may, which means from. Da means knowledge. From what past reason? From what past source brought me to this? There's either a past reason or a future reason, or a combination of the two. Again, we don't even know. It could be a combination of many things. But the fact that the Hebrew language has two words for why, one indicating looking towards the future, and one indicating looking towards the past, that teaches us that's the way we're supposed to approach everything that happens to us in life. Hashem, what do you want me to learn for the future? How is this preparing me for a future event? Or madua, how is this correcting, perhaps, something from the past? Now, I'll give you an example of what that might look like a little bit. It's a story that I think is very effective. During the Battle of Britain. So the Battle of Britain, we know that the Germans were trying to bring England to its knees, and they did it through the Luftwaffe began a series of bombings of Britain, of London, and that was supposed to be the prelude to a canal crossing, where they're going to cross the English Channel, and basically occupy England, which sounds almost crazy if you think about it, but the Germans seem to be pretty effective in occupying the rest of Europe. They had the goal to occupy England as well. And there was a battle fought over London, over Britain, it was called the Battle of Britain, and that was the battle in which Winston Churchill commented and said, "Never have we owed so much to so few." I mean, it was basically the British fighters, who went up and engaged the German Air Force and basically kept them at bay. And I think the weather changed, and that was also part of it. They weren't able to do the channel crossing. So it's during that battle, there was a particular, one of the leading squadron leaders was someone named Douglas Bader. So Douglas Bader was a World War I flying ace for the British. And after World War I, he used to do like show flying. And one of those show flights, he crashed and he lost both his legs. He became a double amputee. And when World War II began, the British started fighting the Germans. Somehow he was a very effective pilot, and they knew him from World War I. And I guess they didn't have, even though he had an immense disability, he convinced them that they should recommission him as an officer. And so he went up again as a pilot, as a double amputee. He used to help him in a Jeep, get him onto the plane, get him strapped in. And number one, his inspiration that he gave as a double amputee, willing to keep fighting, was apparently so inspiring to other pilots that gave that extra level of motivation. And they say, like in those type of dogfights in the sky, motivation is everything. That extra degree of motivation is a very important factor. But they say number two, it says that he was able to do feats in the air to outmaneuver German planes that no one else could do. And they say the reason why is because he was a double amputee. the problem apparently when a plane goes from very high altitude to a low altitude very quickly, what happens? The blood rushes from the brain, goes down to the bottom of the body, and the person basically gets dizzy and can pass out. But the fact, because he was a double amputee, the blood only had to go to half the body and then was able to circulate right back up to the brain. So it was his disability that enabled him to be the most effective pilot for the British. You know, so it's sometimes you think if he's having this crash, you know, whatever it was in the 20s, and he becomes a double amputee, you know, what could possibly be the future good of this terrible tragedy? The answer is it's because you're double amputee. You might be the key person responsible for saving Britain. That's an example of a lama. For what future good will this bring? That's to what? A medua is, you look at the past. When you look at the past, it's sometimes, we don't see the past. The past we don't know. But the Baal Shem Tov tells us something very interesting. The fascinating story of the Baal Shem Tov. That one time the Baal Shem Tov called a number of his students and said, we have to go to a certain town. And they said, why? Just come. We need a minion. They get to this little town. They find a little house. They walk in, and they said, I didn't want to tell you why we're here, but we need it for a minion that there's a bris milah. We need to be here for a bris this morning. Everyone's very excited. There's a bris milah, and they have 10 men there, and they're able to say all the brachos and say kaddish. And then sitting down then after the bris milah for a suda, for a meal. And the mother takes the baby to nurse the baby in the back room, and all of a sudden they hear a scream, and the baby dies. And the mother comes out, and the house, which was a house of joy, becomes a house of mourning, and everyone is distraught. We just did a bris milah, and then the baby is taken. So the Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov are riding back with the Baal Shem Tov, and they're turning to him, and they're like, we don't get it. Like, what happened over here? You know, and the Baal Shem Tov said, I'll tell you. He said, didn't you hear the name of the baby? He said, yeah, it was Yosef. He said, don't you know what today is? Today is the yard site of the death of Yosef Cairo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. When Yosef Cairo was born, apparently there was a typhoid epidemic or something like that. And therefore he couldn't have his bris milah on the 8th day. He had to wait for a later date. This baby was the Gilgul Neshama of Rabbi Yosef Cairo, who needed that one tikkun of having the brit milah on the 8th day so his neshama could have completion in Shemayim. After he had the brit milah, that was it, it was done. So the Talmidim said, like, well, what about the parents? Like, what about their pain? And he responded, I can't explain everything to you. But you can extrapolate the rest. If you know there's goodness and purpose in the baby's death, you have to understand that, of course, Kosh Baruch Hu has arranged it in a way there's goodness and purpose in the pain that the parents are experiencing as well. For whatever reason their neshamas might have needed. That's an example of a madua, from what past source. So we're always called upon to say, lama, for what purpose? Or madua, from what past source? And the answer is we don't know. We don't know. And Hashem demands from us, therefore, to really exercise the muscle of emunah, of trust, where we say, Hashem, there's a goodness here that I don't understand you always. I don't get you always. And that's part of the plan. The plan in our relationship with Hashem has to be such where we learn to love Hashem and love Hashem for the most purest possible reason. The purest possible love is when you love the other where you don't understand the other. So to love Hashem where we don't fully understand why Hashem does something, that's what we really have to work on loving Hashem. And that's what we like to say, like, you know, in human relationships also, where we really love our spouses, really is exactly where we don't understand our spouse. And where we understand our spouse, like, okay, so we're loving our mind's perception of what we think goodness is. That's a lot of self-love. It's when we don't understand our wives, our spouses, you know, that's where the real love kicks in. So how do you get to that love? Well, you extrapolate. That person is so good and so kind and so caring and so concerned with me always. I have to assume what they're doing right now is also an element of their goodness. That's not so hard to do because they have such a good track record with us. Same thing is true with Hashem. Hashem, I don't understand you always. You're going to bring things into our lives which are going to be difficult. And we're not going to understand your purpose and plan in it. The answer is that's exactly what we have to learn to love you. And we have to extrapolate and say, you bring so much goodness. And our lives are always filled with exactly what we need, whether it be our cells doing mitosis, whether it be our lungs respirating, whether it be our kidneys expelling waste, with precision and exactitude. And it's all because you love us and care about us and involved with us. So therefore we can extrapolate in the areas of our life which are difficult. So therefore the challenges of life really are part of the plan. We can't expect a life which is going to be challenge free, because therefore we want to demand from us that we work on that relationship with Hashem further and love Hashem where we don't understand. However, the challenge that we have to do, how do we equip ourselves for it? By number one, understanding that we don't know the future, like the criticism of Yaakov. We might not even know the present, like Ratoras Avram says about Yaakov. We have to understand that there's a luma and there's a medua. There's a lama and there's a for what reason or from what reason. So these are tools to equip ourselves to be able to face it. So with that said, I just want to take you to the second part of this year, which is the story of Rabbi Akiva. And this is the second part, and this is the part we're going to conclude with. There's a famous story which we're familiar with, I think, in the Gemara Brachot, that on Daf Samach Amud Beis 60, Daf 60 Amud Beis, and Rabbi Akiva was known for something. It says as follows: that Rabbi Akiva used to say, a person has to always train himself to say, everything the merciful one does is for the good. That's a good statement. You know, sometimes we translate that as Gamzu Latova. Rabbi Akiva says, everything that the merciful one does is for the good. He calls Hashem the merciful one. Train yourself to say that, he says. And then there's a story here. And the story is as follows. It says, one time Rabbi Akiva was going on the way. He arrived at a town. Boy Ushpiza. And he requested Ushpiza. Ushpiza means, like the word Ushpizin, which means to be a guest. Just tell you something, just interesting fact, by the way, that the word Auschwitz, the town Auschwitz, is really come from the Polish town called Auschwitzen, which really comes from the Hebrew or Aramaic word, which is Ushpizin. The Jews of the town called it Ushpizin. And that became Polish Auschwitzen, and the Germans Germanized it to be Auschwitz. It was a town called Ushpizin, which means guests. We were known for hospitality. It was a very holy place. It must have been so. Someone commented once, I remember a student, I told that to a group of students one time, and one student commented and said, it must have been that Hashem was hinting that this is going to be a place where you're going to be my holy guests in Shemaim. That's what Ushpizin, just an interesting word. In Sukkot, we know the word from Sukkot, right? In Sukkot, we bring it to our Sukkot, the Ushpizin. So what happened? Rabbi Akiva was boy Ushpiza, lo yahavilei. They didn't give it to him. Ama kol diavach man the tov. What did he say? Everything the merciful one does is for the good. Azul bas bedabra. He went out and he slept in the field, which is strange. Rabbi Akiva comes to town and nobody finds a place for him to stay. You would think that Rabbi Akiva, everyone would want him to sleep in your house. I mean, Rabbi Vadi Yosef, Alav Shalom, comes to Queens. And would we have him sleep out on Queens Boulevard, or, in the Forest Park? I think we would all be vying for that position. Who would host Vadi Yosef? And Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, yes, well, the Torah was given to Rabbi Akiva. He was one of our greatest sages. And he has to go sleep out in the field. So it says, Hava Bahade, he had with him Tarnagola v'chamer v'shraga. He had a rooster, a donkey, and a candle. That's interesting. I understand why he's traveling with a donkey, because he rides it. I'm not sure why he's traveling with a rooster. To wake him up in the morning. Right. I guess everybody does that. Yes, that.
Does he have alarm?
He didn't have an iPhone to set.
To pray nets.
You want to get him a nets, right? Okay. The rooster would wake him up, Tarnagal. something strange, I think. I don't think people travel with roosters. Never heard that, even as alarm clocks. It says Vishraga, and he had a candle. Okay, I guess candle he wants to learn at night, I guess. Osa zika kovid the shraga. A wind came and blew out the candle. Asa shunra okle the tarnago. A cat came along and ate the donkey, ate the rooster. Asa arye okle the chamra. And a lion came and ate the donkey. Okay, it was not a good night in the night of Rabbi Akiva. His candle's blown out by the wind. His rooster's eaten by a cat. And a lion comes and attacks his donkey. Okay, not one of the best nights. And he's sleeping out in the field. Abba called the other Rahman of the Tov. What does he say? Everything that the merciful one does is for the good. That night, a legion of soldiers came and they took the whole town captive. Amalahu. In the morning, I guess he woke up and he saw it. He said, Lav Amri L'chu. Wasn't I correct in saying, Kol Masha Kodesh Baruch Hu,
Everything's for the best.
Kol Masha Kodesh Baruch Hu, Akol the Tova, right? Everything Kodesh Baruch Hu does, everything is for the best. Wasn't I correct in saying that? Because he realized, had he not been in the field, he would have been taken captive with the town. I assume had they seen the candle, they would have seen him. Had they heard the rooster, they might have discovered him. And had they heard the donkey bray, they might have, also like located his position. So he realized, wasn't I right in saying that everything that happened to me, I look at the future good, and I realized it was as I was experiencing it, there was a future good that was awaiting me, and I didn't know it. And that's a story that I think is very meaningful on many levels, and it's certainly, and just on its most simplest level, it teaches us the aspect of how careful we have to say, Kol man davar l'tov avid. Everything is for the good. The merciful one is always arranging good for us, and our inability to see it is we can't see the future. Maybe we can't even see the present. We certainly can't see the past. However, the Maharal Prague really expresses the idea that this is a metaphor. That this never really happened. That whenever you see stories like this in amongst our sages are really trying to convey to us deep wisdom. And it's the way, what really triggers us is the strangeness of events. This does not seem normal. Rabbi Akiva should be offered a place to sleep. He should not be expected to sleep out in the woods over there, in the field. It's also very strange that he's traveling with a rooster. That's unusual. The fact that we're supposed to be surprised that the wind blows out the candle, like, well, what do you expect? That's what wind does. Wind blows out candles. Like, that's not a major thing to start bemoaning. Kol man davar l'tov avid. For example, on Shabbos, you're not supposed to walk around the candle. One reason is because you understand it's going to go out. It's going to extinguish. Candles go out. We move them a little bit. We might be over on Kriya, the Kraft, and Shabbos is also. So the candles go out is not something that should startle us. However, lions eating donkeys should surprise us. I don't think there was a lion epidemic. Since when do lions attack donkeys, especially when human beings are standing right there?
Yeah.
We have the animal kingdom is afraid of us because they sense our neshama. So if we're near our donkey, a lion, unless it's a crazed lion, is not going to go near us or the donkey. And I don't think the donkey went down so easily either. And the donkey laid over and just played dead. I'm sure the donkey resisted and brayed and made a lot of noise. So that made less noise than the donkey would have made had it just brayed naturally. But the Romans aren't going to say, "What is something going on over there?" Soldiers, So how would the fact that the lion ate and protected him from being captured? And then he comes back into the town in the morning, and he says that he sees that was taken capture. The word captured, it was captured. It wasn't meant to town to be captured. It doesn't say they were, let's say, taken off into captivity, but the town was captured. Interesting. So the Maharal sees this. And the Rabbi Prague, Rabbi Yehuda Loew of Prague, one of the great rabbis during the 1600s, probably one of the biggest thinkers in terms of connecting halacha to more its philosophical source. And he lived a very long life, over 90 years, and buried in Prague. In one of his works on Chidushei Agadadus, he says that you have to look at this as a metaphor. And there are different ways to play the metaphor. And oftentimes when our sages are trying to convey to us maybe the deepest information they want to convey, it's always done through stories. And the reason why is because, number one, stories attract our interest. Number two, they force us to think and to break it down. And the more we think and break it down, the more work we have to do. And the more work we have to do, the more the wisdom becomes part of who we are. And the purpose of wisdom is it should affect our actions. Greatest Torah because it brings to action. So the more you have to work on something to understand it, the more it affects and changes you. So a lot of wisdom is always hidden under the lock over here. Let's take a look. It seems that Rabbi Akiva is teaching us is that the reason why it's difficult to experience the goodness that God does is there are three things that get in the way. The reason why it's difficult to say and to understand that everything is good and everything is love and everything is a manifestation of Hashem's plan, which is purposeful and the ultimate good, is because we have three areas of our life that oftentimes confuse us. So sometimes what can confuse us is the donkey, or I should say the lion can eat the donkey. What does that mean? The chamor, in Hebrew, chamor means chomriot. Chomriot means physicality. A donkey is always a metaphor in the language of our sages for the body. That's why it says that when Mashiach comes, he's going to be rochev ala chamor. He's going to be riding on the donkey. Now, in truth, he might be riding in a Mercedes, or Lexus, or Bentley.
Hummer.
He's going to be Hummer. But he's going to be. But we don't know what he's going to be riding. I hope he's going to be riding something very dignified. However, what we do know about Mashiach is he's going to be rochev ala chamor. He's going to be riding on his physicality, meaning he's not going to be controlled by his body, his passions and his drives and his wants and his lusts and his hunger and the instincts that are part of our body. That's not what's going to rule him. He's going to be rochev al chamor. He's going to rule over it. He's riding over it. Wow. His mind, his seichel is ruling the body, which is also the Jewish vision of what it means to be a king. To be a king means a melech. Melech is moach, lev, heart. Chaf, kloim. Kloim means kidneys. The essence of being a king is your mem, your moach, your brain is above your emotions, and brain and emotion are above your kloim. Kidneys is always the idea of passion, because kidneys are the part of the body that pushes liquid out of the body. That's the idea of passion. So to be a king means you put your brain first. If you spell it backwards, by the way, melech, the backwards spells kelem, kilem, which means lachlim in Hebrew, means to be disgusting. If you put to be disgusting. If you put your passions above your heart, and by passion part of the heart above your brain, you're ruled by your lusts and your instincts and your wants. That's the Torah definition of being disgusting. To be a king means the brain is in control. And that's what the Gemara Nida says, something very interesting. The Gemara Nida, the Moral says that when a baby is in the womb, so what does a baby look like in the womb? It's in the fetal position. Where are the baby's hands? They're high up. And what are the baby's hands holding? The head. The Moral says, because the baby in the womb understands that the real source of connection to God is through the brain. So it's holding the place where I'm fully connected. So we lead through the brain. That's always the Jewish vision. So what happens sometimes, so the Mashiach is going to be rochev ala chamor, he's going to be riding on his donkey. He's going to control his physicality. Sometimes what happens, however, the lion can eat the donkey. That's a metaphor that sometimes it's difficult to experience God's goodness because the body is in pain. When we're suffering physically, it's very hard to understand that everything is for the good, which I think is true. And therefore, Rabbi Akiva is telling us we have to prepare ourselves for that. Gamzu l'tova. This is for the good. Because when the body is really in pain, it's going to be hard. So get ready for that. We have to be prepared for the lion eating the donkey. If we're not ready for that, if God forbid physical illness or physical pain overwhelms us, we won't be able to experience the goodness. We'll be so overwhelmed by the pain of the body. So you have to be prepared, to be ready for the lion eating the donkey. Second thing he teaches us, beautiful metaphor, sometimes the cat eats the rooster. Okay, everybody. What's the cat always a metaphor for? The language of our sages? Let me ask a question. Are cats trustworthy?
No.
No. Dogs are trustworthy. Kelef, Kulev, they go after your heart. Man's best friend. Cat, the word for cat in Hebrew is a chitul. Chatul. Chitulim in Hebrew means to be windy and bend. Cats are sneaky. They have 9 lives. You don't know where they are, what they're going to do. You know, they pretend to be your friend, but they're not your friend. You know, the cat is always the metaphor for the Yetzer Hara. The rooster. We make a blessing of the rooster every morning. Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, asher natan la'asech rivina lavchin v'layla. Hashem, you've given the rooster understanding to distinguish between day and night. Why do we make that blessing of the rooster every morning? So it's interesting because for one reason is because the rooster has bina. Bina means intuition. The rooster can distinguish day before day begins. When does the rooster crow? Not at dawn, but the moment before dawn. Which really therefore doesn't make sense why we use it as an alarm clock. Because it knows the moment just before dawn. So dawn's coming in a moment. So actually the light would wake him up. But we make a blessing over the rooster because Hashem invested him with this capacity called bina. That it can see that which is not there. Where did it get that ability? That's an amazing talent. Women, by the way, possess that. More so than men. Women have bina. That's what, listen to your wife about the quality of a guest. That's what Tom tells us. She knows better than we do. But really the blessing we make every morning is we're really making a blessing of a human intellect. God, if you've invested that rooster with such an amazing capacity, that bina, how much more so should we be grateful for our minds, which not just have the limited bina of a rooster, but we have the ability to design and to create and create iPhones and to create skyscrapers and to create poetry and music and come up with the Chidush Torah. You know, it's a blessing over the human mind. So the rooster is always a metaphor for the mind. What is the idea, therefore, then, when the cat eats the rooster? The cat eats the rooster is the idea that sometimes it's difficult to deal with life's challenges. Why? Because as we're undergoing the challenge, the Yetzer Hara gets inside of our mind, that's where it lives, and it starts confusing us. If God is really good, he would bring this pain to you. Maybe there's really no God, this is just coincidence. You know, if God really loves you, how could this possibly be a manifestation of love? It must be God is cruel. The Yetzer Hara can start speaking to the rooster in ways that could cause enormous confusion. So Rabbi Akiva is trying to prepare us for that. And says sometimes you have to be ready, understand that when we're in pain, there's going to be a battle between the rooster, or between the cat and the rooster, between the Yetzer Hara and the intellect. And be prepared for that. Have responses. Or maybe the response is no response. For example, by Avram Avinu, it says, when he was on his way to the Akiva. So it says the Satan, the Yetzer Hara, is the same spiritual force, came to him and said in the language of the Medrashes, it says, Saba, which means like grandpa, Ata Meshuga, are you out of your mind? Hashem gives you a son at the age of 100, and now you're going to murder him? That's a good question. Not a bad question for the Yetzer Hara to ask. What's Avram's response? He says, Almanaskin, which means nonetheless. What does nonetheless mean? I'm not speaking to you. I'm not engaging you in conversation. Because if I engage you in conversation, I'm going to lose. So one response when the cat is eating the rooster is you have to understand sometimes you have to disengage from the battle. I'm not going to fight. Because if I fight, I'm going to lose. Sometimes just don't think. Just go with it. Just, okay. Hashem loves me and that's it. I'm going forward. I'm doing what Hashem has asked me to do. I'm not thinking bad. So Rabbi Akiva is warning us. You got to be ready. What's the third one? Sometimes the wind blows out the candle. The candle's always a metaphor for the Neshama, the soul. The wind in Hebrew is ruach. Ruach is the same word in Hebrew as ruchniut. Ruchniut means spirituality. Ruach is the same idea, the wind and something enormously spiritual. Sometimes the wind blows out the candle. It's a fascinating metaphor. Sometimes Hashem himself blows out our neshama. What does that mean? I think it means like this, that oftentimes, in the type of work we do at Emet, is somebody will go to Israel, and they'll go study in Israel, and they'll come back. And oftentimes what we will hear in the office is a comment like, when I was in yeshiva, I was in seminary, I was so inspired. Everything was speaking to me. The stones on the street spoke to me. People spoke. The whole place was speaking to Kodesh Baruch Hu is real and alive. My life is purposeful. But I come back to America and say, I feel cold. I feel like it's just, I lost the connection. It's not like, it's not there, you know, and then people start questioning, did I really have the connection, or maybe I was just creating and inventing it, and what the response to that statement is always, that's exactly what you're supposed to be experiencing. Because sometimes Hashem himself blows out the candle. What does that mean? He gives us initial inspiration in our life to excite us and to start us and get us going. And then what does Hashem do? He takes away the inspiration. The neshama feels cold and abandoned. Why? Because the real work has to be the work that we do on our own. The metaphor is always a beautiful metaphor when you teach a baby to walk. And what happens is the baby is crawling, all of a sudden the baby decides it could stand up and starts walking, and parents get excited. You take those baby's hands, and the baby walks 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. The baby smiles from ear to ear. They're so excited. This new life is so, so the enthusiasm for life now. Like, I can move, I can walk, and there's a look on the baby's face like a possibility. And it's what do we do as parents right then? We let go. And what happens to the baby's face? It's a moment of terror. I was so secure, I was so excited, I was so confident, I was walking, and now all of a sudden I'm shaking. But we know as parents, if we didn't take away our hands, the baby would never learn to walk. And then, what do we do? Just before the baby falls, we grab the baby again. As Hashem does. He blows out the candle. And there's darkness and there's coldness. He says, now find me on your own. Not because you feel good, you feel spiritually high, you feel spiritually elevated. Do the real work to intellectually know that I'm really there for you and I love you and it's real. And at the moment we think I'm never going to come back, he comes back. That's part of the process. But if we're not ready for that, if we're not aware that that's part of the process, a person can be terrified and shocked and just and feel abandoned and not know how to deal with it. So Rabbi Akiva is teaching us something, I think something extraordinary over here. That in order to be able to appreciate that Hashem is always there and everything is good, we have to train ourselves to exercise certain muscles. One muscle is just the repetition of saying everything is good. And to look for it, to see it, and train ourselves to say, I don't know the future, I don't know the past, I don't even know the present. And at the same time, be aware on a deeper level to understand that when small things happen to the body, say it's for the good. So if something painful happens, that's very difficult to say it's good, we're ready for it. Prepare ourselves for that battle with the Yetzer Hara, to have the ammunition to defeat it. Sometimes the ammunition to defeat is like Avram Avinu said, I'm not engaging you in dialogue right now. Now is not the time to argue. As we know, like for example, we're trying to wake up in the morning. The Yetzer Hara will give us every reason why we should stay in bed. What's the answer to the Yetzer Hara as we're trying to wake up in the morning? Don't talk to it. It will win. It will find a way. You feel better if you sleep a little longer. You'll be a better husband. We know there are all the arguments. You'll be more patient. You'll be a better parent. We know every argument. We'll lose. Sometimes the argument is, I'm not engaging in dialogue. I'm getting up. We have to be prepared for the canting of the rooster. And we have to be prepared when Hashem will cause darkness in our life. When he'll blow out the candle, there'll be coldness. And understand that's part of the process as well. And be equipped to say, I know you're there, Hashem, I just can't feel you and see you, but I'm going to use my other senses, I'm going to use my intellect, I'm going to use my knowledge of what I didn't know to draw upon and be secure that I'm doing the right thing and on the right path. If we could do that, we could avoid being captured by the army. That's where we avoid captivity. That's where we avoid being captured by what seems to be the pain and the difficulties of life. And we can approach life with the enthusiasm and the confidence and the joy that God willing, we'll never have to say that our lives were bad. We'll never have to ever utter the word that Yaakov uttered and say that my life is Yemei Shnei Chayai Hayroim. Thank you, everybody.